In part one of this Ryman Memory Special, host Eddie Stubbs sits down for a chat at the Ryman Auditorium with guest Steve Wariner.
Hi, I'm Eddie Stubbs. Welcome to Ryman Memories. We're here at the Mother Church of Country Music, the historic Ryman Auditorium, as we celebrate the 125th anniversary year of this place that is so special. It's on the National Register of Historic Landmarks, and a lot of special things have happened in the life of our special guest today, Steve Wariner here. Steve, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Eddie. Glad to be here.
Wow. What are your first memories of hearing the Grand Ole Opry from the Ryman Auditorium over WSM Radio?
Well, the first memories that I have of the Opry is my mother and father up in Indiana listening to the Opry, and I was always intrigued, listening on the radio. I could see it in my mind what people were doing. I knew that they were coming and going, and it was a kind of orchestrated chaos probably on stage, I figured. And I found out later that it was, but just those vivid, my imagination, I'd listen with my dad and my mom. My dad was, of course, a huge, musician and a fiddler, so he was a huge Opry fan. My mom was too. But and then I love the stories that my dad told of he listened to the Opry in Kentucky, where he was from as a kid. They would listen to the Grand Ole Opry. I guess it was the battery radios back then, the old battery type radios, not batteries like we have now, but. So yeah, a lot of great memories of and dreaming, a lot of dreaming that went along with that as a young kid that was aspiring to play guitar and sing and be in the music business. That's something that was a way distant dream. That maybe one day I could be there, even if in the audience. I just want to be there.
How old were you at this time when you were first hearing the Opry coming from the Ryman here?
My memories go back pretty much as far as I can remember. I mean, very young. I remember listening to the Opry. My dad would listen, and
was it appointment listening in your house?
Yes, it was. Yeah, I mean, we would get back to listen to it if we were somewhere, on Saturday night. And
do you recall your first time here at the Ryman Auditorium? And was that as a spectator, as a visitor here?
Well, see, I was heartbroken because I think it was about 67, 68. My mom and dad made a trip. They had never been to the Opry, and they came here in I think 68, I believe, and I was heartbroken because I didn't get to come, and I had to stay home with all my siblings, and put up with them. Excuse me. But I remember that Charlie Walker at the time had a big new record out called Don't Squeeze the Charmin. It was played off of the Don't Squeeze My Charmin, the girl's name, played off of the TV commercial of the Charmin toilet tissue,
Mm-hmm.
Which was a novelty song, of course, but I remember they gave away that night. My mom came home with a couple rolls of Charmin tissue paper, So I remember that's what you came home with, okay, from the Opry. So, and that was Charlie's big record, I guess, and they were promoting it, and so I was a little jealous that I didn't get to go. But the first time I was ever in this building, and Eddie, I think you've heard me tell this story probably, but I'll tell it again here, because the very first time I ever played here was with Dottie West, and I was in her band.
What year?
This was 73. It was December of 73, I believe it was. And I'd only been to Nashville a couple times. I'd never even been here, but a little bit. But Dottie, she had the Opry booked, and she says, we're going to do it Saturday night. And she goes, you come to the house over in Green Hills. She goes, come and ride with me, and I'll take you for your first Opry. And so I go, sure. And so I took my little bass and went over there and jumped in her white Cadillac, and we took off down Belmont Boulevard for the Opry from Green Hills. And I remember we were coming over the hill about where Bridgestone Arena is now, and there was on the right, I believe, was Broadway Barn. It was a place there called the Broadway Barn. And we came down right when we were getting ready to turn at Fifth Avenue off of Broadway. I heard, and if I'm not mistaken, it was Roy Acuff. And I believe it was Roy, and he said, here's a little lady from McMinnville, Tennessee. And we were listening on the radio, turning it left on Fifth, and I went, he's introducing her, and we're still a block away. And I'm starting to freak out. I'd never even been in this building, and I'm thinking, where do I go? Now the nerves are starting to hit me. And she pulls in the alley, which was not the back alley. At that time, artists pulled in at the front. And 3 or 4 guys jumped out. I heard the applause dying down on the radio, and I'm still in the parking lot. And so I grabbed my bass out of the trunk, and I take off running, and they rush her in, and I'm out there by myself, and I'm thinking, and then somebody goes, come on, this way, go this way. And I ran past, and I think I ran into Marty Robbins, and everybody's huddled up everywhere because it's so small then. It was really only 2 dressing rooms, I think, for boys and girls. And so I'm running past Miss Minnie and little Jimmy, and I'm like hallucinating. I'm so flipped out that I'm at the Ryman Auditorium, and I go, where do I plug in? They go, here, and Dottie's already on stage waving at the people. And so I made it, but I mean, the applause died, and I'm still looking where do I plug in. I'd never even been here. I was 17.
Wow.
And 17, just turning 18.
Wow.
So I was like, oh my gosh. And the thing I remember vividly that night too was the balcony that hung down. It was different. The balcony was, it was hung down real low. You could reach up and almost touch people right there. They were right at you. You know, I could shake hands with people at the right and left side of the stage. That balcony hung down so close there. They were great seats, I'm sure, but boy, I didn't know what to think. A young kid, you know, never even been to Nashville but twice, you know, and here I was on the Opry with Dottie, and she was so kind, though. She was patient with me, and we did it a few times before it moved out. I think we did it 2 or 3 times before it moved out in '74.
I was getting ready to say you came here in December of '73, and at that time it was in its last months here. Because March of '74 is when they left here and went out to the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah, it was in March. That's right. Yeah. So we did it. I think we did it twice. It would have been twice, I believe, then, because one thing I remember real well too. I liked it, but I remember people changing clothes. All the guys were in the dressing room, and I remember everybody was like changing clothes, getting ready to play next, and I'm just standing there watching so-and-so drop his pants and get ready to play, you know. So it's like, wow, that's little Jimmy Dickens, you know.
Well,
but it was just everybody, you did what you did, you know. It's just one big dressing room, and it was so much camaraderie. You could just feel everybody was having fun, and at that time it was freezing cold. I remember it was real cold in here, and I know it was hot in the summers too, I guess so. But I remember it was pretty cold. But it was just people everywhere. I remember it being a lot of folks and not a lot of room, you know. So
wow, getting to go out on that stage for the first time, that's got to be one of the standout moments in your life that you'll never ever forget.
There's no question. And I say this when I speak to young artists and young people. You know, I always tell writers and singers, dream as big as you want to. Dream big always, because if I can come here as a little kid from a podunk little town in Indiana and come here and play at the Opry one day as I dreamed many years ago, then anyone can do it, you know, if you dream big enough and work hard for it, you know. So
you talked earlier about how the balcony that we're seated in here went all the way around. In those days, it would actually go to the back wall of the auditorium.
That's correct.
Where the stage is. This auditorium underwent a major renovation. It was closed for a period of time, and it reopened in 1994, and they made it a lot more television friendly. The creature comforts you cite about how cold it was.
Right.
There was no air conditioning in this facility in the summertime, and in the wintertime you nearly froze because the heating plant was not the best. But they created dressing rooms, and some of the pew space out here in the balcony had to be sacrificed. So there are dressing rooms behind there now, but there's still a lot of pictures around the walls that you can see that take you back to that time. And people will notice, no doubt, that are seeing this today, that there are people walking behind us. This is very much a living, breathing museum. And this is referred to as the Carnegie Hall of the South.
Of the South, yeah.
And people can come here and tour every day. And to think that it's made it 125 years is just
unreal.
Just amazing. But it's a very, very special place on the National Register of Historic Landmarks, as it should be.
As it should be.
As it should be. So, you know, it's a very special place, and we hope that in this 125th anniversary year that more than ever people will come and take this in. I want to talk about Dottie West. You know, to a lot of people, she's just a name, but she was so important in your life. For the person that's watching and hearing this, what would you like to tell the uninitiated about Dottie West?
Well, there's so much that people they may think they know about her, but they may not. You know, she was a tremendous songwriter. Excuse me, she was a great songwriter. She was, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe I'm right on this, she was the first female country artist to win a Grammy.
That's correct.
She wrote the song too, Here Comes My Baby, in '64 if I'm not mistaken, and that is a huge deal. I mean, the first female to win a Grammy, country girl singer. And I remember those days when I would travel with her. I was with her 3 years, and I remember her talking about Patsy and Patsy and Patsy. She and Patsy were real big friends, and so she really revered Patsy Cline, and I know they were really close. But to be in her presence and hear her speaking, you know, about their relationship, and you know, at that time, you know, this was the '70s, so it was still not that far removed from when Patsy left us, you know, and so she was really, really, you know, had not really gotten over that one for sure. And to hear her talk about those days and her early days in Nashville was really special. And she was as kind to me as could be. I remember her standing, talking to my mother. My mother was apprehensive about me coming to Nashville as a teenager.
With a woman.
With a woman, a woman singer, a redheaded woman singer, you know. But Dottie was great. I remember she put her arms around my mom and she said, you know, don't worry about Steve when you're not around, because I'm going to be like his mother. I'm like his big sister. And she looked at me with a stern look and said, I'm not going to let him get into any trouble. So you can be assured when you're not around, he's going to be looked after. And I was, you know, she did a wonderful job with that.
Wow. What was her way of handling things when she was on this stage? How was Dottie West revered when she came here and performed at the Ryman?
The crowd went crazy, and she walked the stage, you know, with a mic, and she went back and forth and worked the crowd. I was watching her. You know, she went over to the balcony, interacting with those folks, and she was watching the crowd, you know, working it just like a pro would do, you know, and she was the consummate pro, man. She was so good, and she always gave credit to her band, you know. She acknowledged us and talked about us. And later when I started singing a lot, and Dottie realized that I was probably, or I wanted to be, but I think she realized that I would be an artist at some point. She was the first to push me and really support me and wanted me to be out in front, and featured me in her show. And I got to be Don Gibson and some of those duets, you know, that she had with Jim Reeves and Don Gibson, some of the hits. And so that was really a thrill to get to sing those parts. She was tremendous. I mean, just a wonderful person and a real teacher for me. I always tell people that I went to the Dottie West School of Music. I'd get on the bus and she would say, what did you write this week? The first little while I was with her, I said, well, nothing this week. Well, why not? You know, she was like a teacher, you know. Well, you need to bring me some stuff. Show me what you're writing, you know. And she turned me into definitely more of a writer than I was, and the writing part became very important to me. Of course, later on, writing most, if not, you know, a lot of my later hits that I had, you know. But she was very instrumental in nurturing me along as an artist in my creative process, you know, writing. And actually, as a performer, I learned so much just watching her.
What did you learn from her, watching her?
Well, a couple of things. I think the biggest thing I learned with her, I think with Dottie, two things. I think I learned to appreciate the audience, you know, because she used to tell me all the time, she goes, if they don't come to see us, we're unemployed, you know, we don't even have a job. If we need to do everything we can to give them their money's worth and make sure that they go away wanting to come to the next show. And that was one thing I took with me, that she was always so professional, you know. She was always an artist, you know. She didn't let anyone see her public-wise that she wasn't in that zone, you know, the artist. And the writing part too, she was very disciplined writing, you know, and she taught me that you need to be prepared, you need to work on your craft, get better, you know, practice, you know, work on it.
Did you ever write together?
We did. Nothing that really turned into a lot of stuff that I wrote with her. I would, you know, it was before I really started coming into my own, but she wouldn't let me put her name on it because she would say, "Oh no, I just did that," you know, it was so early in my career that it wasn't recorded or didn't turn into anything really. But she was still in the teaching phases, I guess. But we did write a few things, and I recorded at her. She had a little home studio even back then. She had a little she built a little studio at her place on Shies Hill, and we recorded a few of my demos out there.
How neat, how neat. Now, I know you spent some time with Bob Luman, but that did not occur here at the Ryman.
That's correct, that's correct. That was right when they moved in, let's see, in 70, I think it was 75, I believe it was, maybe 70, late 75, 76, I went with Bob, if my math is correct there. I was with Bob about a year and a half or so. And it was funny, here at the Ryman is where I told Dottie that I was leaving her. I was just nervous wreck to tell her that I was going to give her my notice, and I wanted to stay in town and be a songwriter. I wrote for her company. I wrote for her publishing company at that time, which was part of Combine Music. But I gave her my notice in the parking lot. It was right out the parking lot right there. And I remember I was so nervous, and she was not happy about it, but she understood. But then I saw Bob Luman at the Opry, the new place. Like, as soon as they moved out there, the new Opry, the big house, I saw Bob out there one night. I had just left Dottie, and he came up to me and he said, "I need a bass player to go to Texas for a couple of days." And I said, "Well, when are you leaving?" He goes, "In about 2 hours." And I go, "I guess I could go," because I was just out there. I was not on the road with Dottie anymore. So I said, "Well, I'll go with you in Houston and Dallas," I think it was, and Fort Worth. So went with him and wound up staying about a year and a half, and just loved Bob Luman. Took away a lot of lessons from him too,
What about the transitional period of being with Dottie West? You're new in town, working with her. The Opry's only here for a few months, March of 1974. They leave this structure here. It was in very bad shape. I know Bashful Brother Oswald, who was a hero to both of us, said the last night that he remembered being here at the Ryman, he said that he could look, while on stage, he would look up above. And he said that there were holes in the roof of this building, if you can believe that. And he could see stars in the sky that were coming through the holes in the roof. It was that bad. It had fallen into such disrepair.
Now, I did not know that.
Yeah, he told that story many times. But, going to the Grand Ole Opry House, creature comforts abound out there.
Yeah.
It was a whole new world for the Opry. But there was a lot of sentiment attached to this place, and I'm sure you felt the sadness, like most people, of leaving here. But you were young and said, "Wow, this is neat. This is what it should have always been. Everybody's got their own separate dressing room.
Yeah, this is fancy out here."
Yeah.
I remember that stark difference, though. I remember here, now that you say that, I remember that, being crowded in the dressing room with all the players and the artists kind of jumbled up together. I remember thinking, at the time I was in awe, but looking back on it, I do remember thinking, that, it was in disrepair. And especially then you go to the new place, and it's, Opryland is there, and it's shiny out there, and I do remember that. It's like, man, this is the big time here, and not that it wasn't here, but it's just a whole different thing. And I remember the sentiment was, and me, Eddie, I'm a little bit of a traditionalist too. I remember having that sadness a little bit at the same time, because I knew all these places here were all of a sudden left alone, because the centerpiece was the Opry here. And I remember that's around the time John Hartford wrote his song, "Nobody Eats at Line Balls Anymore."
Mm-hmm.
And, there was a little sentiment about that, about sadness that it was leaving Broadway and going out in the suburbs,
Right.
Hey, this is Steve Wariner, and you're watching scenes from my Ryman memories. For more clips like this, just click below.